Awesome. Thank you, Amelia, for that. So as we get into this passage tonight, Jimmy, you were telling me how you and Chelsea this week were binge watching a Netflix mini-series.
Yeah, a little gem that we kind of found on Netflix this week called The English Game, little 6-part mini-series on Netflix, kind of centers around how soccer went from being this sport only played by the kind of upper class, the wealthy, the rich in England, to the enormous kind of sport that it is now, most played sport in the world. And the series kind of centers around these two kind of working class kind of teams. They're bitter rivalries, the two towns that have the teams, but they kind of put their rivalry and their differences aside, and they kind of unite together to take on one of the upper class teams in the FA Cup, and kind of centers around that kind of journey. I don't want to give away too many kind of spoilers, but it's a great little series, great little look at these two kind of towns coming together, united for a kind of cause. So it's good. Definitely should check it out.
Yeah, awesome. Does sound pretty cool. Now, I brought that up though because Peter, I did notice tonight, seems to be writing a bit about people being united together. You see the kind of connection there?
Yes,
yeah.
Nice.
I think he used the term like-minded is what he uses, and I will be asking you about that a bit later.
Yeah.
But for now, over the last couple of weeks, we've kind of seen that Peter's talked to kind of very specific groups of people in each of his letters. So he talked to husbands and wives last week, talked about slaves the week before.
Yes.
What's in store this week?
Yeah, well, again, he's got a very specific kind of audience in mind. Have a look there at those first 4 words of verse 8, where he says, finally, all of you, no exceptions. There's no kind of loopholes there. It's all of you. And it's kind of referring back to some things that he wrote earlier in the letter in chapter 2, when he talked about those who had come to Jesus, put their faith and trust in Jesus, being brought together to be God's special people. And so here he's saying all of you who are Christians, who are part of the church, God's special people. This is kind of written to you. There's no kind of wriggle room. There's no exception. And it's actually, as we think about that, later on we're going to have a look at how that sense of all of you has some things to say to us as followers of Jesus even now.
Yeah, all right. So no exceptions, all Christians involved. Now, which I think makes the first thing that Peter says in verse 8 kind of hard, because he says to be like-minded.
Yes.
But we're all kind of different. In fact, I'll get you guys help me to prove just how different we are.
Yeah.
So for 60 seconds, I'm going to get you to write down all the things that you like. So you can put that in our comment section. You can talk to the person next to you about it. You can write it down on paper. Just for 60 seconds, we'll write that down. You ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Awesome, and we are back. So just look at all of the different responses coming through, and if you can't see the comments, well, you can definitely kind of guess all the different likes that teenagers have.
Yeah.
So we're all different, Jimmy. We're all different. So how can Peter ask that all of us who are reading that letter to have the same kind of mind?
Yeah.
It's impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely sounds a little bit odd, and you're right, we are so different, and it would be impossible to all like all of the same things. So it'll come as a great relief to you that Peter's not saying that, and a great relief probably to many of you that you don't all have to like cricket and Fortnite and puppies. We don't all have to like all those things together to be like-minded. No, what Peter's saying here is there's something bigger, something more important that as followers of Jesus we need to be like-minded about, and that is Jesus. Who Jesus is, what Jesus has done, and particularly here in this letter, what Jesus is calling you to. Basically, Peter's saying here, be like-minded in your mission. Have a unity together about what God is calling you 2. You know, if you've been with us for the last few weeks, you'll be familiar with the words declare and display. They've kind of become like theme words in lots of ways for us. And they actually come out of some verses that Peter wrote earlier in chapter 2. And so if you haven't been with us, or even if you have been with us, I want you to kind of flick back if you've got your Bibles there, or they'll pop up on the screen. We're going to have a look at 2 verses, chapter 2 verse 9 and then chapter 2 verse 12. So come and read them with me. Chapter 2 verse 9 says this: "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." God's people called to declare, to speak out the goodness of what God has done. And then jump down to verse 12. Peter writes, "Live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us." Live such good lives. That's to display the goodness of God through the way that you live. And so what Peter's saying here now in verse 8 of chapter 3 is be like-minded together in your desire and in your mission to declare and display the goodness of Jesus, what he has done for you. See, if you're tuning in tonight, maybe you're just checking out Christianity and youth and what Christianity's all about. Well, here is the heart of what it means to be a Christian, to be a follower of Jesus. See, the Bible, it tells us that all of us reject God. We become his enemies. We set ourselves up as his enemies, and that is because of our sin. That's the word the Bible uses to describe our rejection of God. And yet, in the incredible act of love and mercy, God chose to send Jesus to give up his life, to take the punishment for our rejection of him and die in our place, that we might be welcomed into God's family. The incredible news of the Bible is that there is forgiveness offered to anyone who would come to Jesus and ask for his forgiveness for their rejection of God. It's the incredible news of the Bible, what God has done in Jesus. And so for those then who have been welcomed into God's family, come and put their trust in Jesus, receive that forgiveness, well then the call is to go and share this great news, to declare and display it to those around them. And so yeah, Christians, they have all sorts of likes and dislikes, but here Peter calls Christians, those here in these early Roman times, to be like-minded about their mission to declare and display the goodness of Jesus.
Yeah, awesome. It's a pretty radical way to live though, right? Because I know personally, like for myself, I tend to gravitate, and I think we all do, towards people who kind of think and like the same things as us.
Yeah, it's incredibly radical, because you're right, we do gravitate towards the people who are like us. We tend to decide what we like and dislike, and then we find people to gather around us who like and dislike the same things, because in many ways it just validates the identity that we're kind of seeking to kind of build. But And so much of life is like that, and I'm sure you guys know that, right? Like, it doesn't matter where you are, like-minded people stick together. All the lads stick together, all the dancers stick together, the cubers stick together, those who like sports stick together, teenagers stick together. We tend to gravitate towards the types of people that are like us, that have the same likes and dislikes as us. But here, Peter calls us to do something very different, calls Christians in the Roman Empire to do something radically different to that. He's saying, put all of those likes and dislikes to the side and be like-minded in your mission to declare and display the goodness of Jesus and what he has done for you.
Yeah, awesome. I feel like that's so hard though, because sometimes people get on my nerves, and they're so different to me, and it just feels kind of weird to be around them.
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes they even move into your house and they eat your food and sleep in your rooms. Nah, I'm kidding. I know. You know I love you, bro. I love having you kind of here. But you're right. It is really hard to do. And so I think that's why Peter doesn't just finish verse 8 by saying, finally, all of you be like-minded. He goes on, and have a look at what he says there. He says, finally, all of you be like-minded. Be sympathetic. Love one another. Be compassionate and humble. See, if you're going to be like-minded, then you're going to need those characteristics. if you're going to be like-minded with people around you who aren't the same as you and sometimes do get on your nerves, you're going to have times where you're going to need to be sympathetic and show sympathy to others. And sympathy just means being willing to share in the emotion of what they're going through, rejoicing when they rejoice, mourning when they mourn, being excited when they're getting excited, and joining them in the sadness when they are struggling. It's about being there in the emotional and the challenging highs and lows of life. That's sympathetic. But then Peter goes on, he says, but also love one another. And I think that's fairly kind of self-explanatory, but when you love someone, you have a deep care for how they're going and you want to see them going well. And for Christians, that means you want to see your brothers and sisters grow in Jesus, grow to be more like Jesus. He says, be sympathetic, love one another. But then he finishes, be compassionate and humble. Again, have a tender care for your Christian brothers and sisters, Peter says there. Because you know God had incredible compassion on you. When you didn't deserve it, God showed you remarkable compassion. When he came down and he saw your sin and your brokenness and showed you mercy. And see, when you're humble to recognize just how incredible God's grace to you is, that you don't deserve it, that there's nothing that you've done to deserve God's love, when you're humble enough to recognize how bad you are and yet how great God is, well, then that humility will flow out to others when they're struggling, when they're feeling the challenge of their failures, and you can get alongside them, and rather than put them down for not being good enough, you can get alongside them and you can point them to the one who is great, because you know how incredible his mercy and love is. Be compassionate, be humble. And so, yeah, 100%, brother, you're right. It's not easy. It's not, but isn't it beautiful? I mean, isn't it a beautiful thing? Who wouldn't want to be part of a community that lives like that loves like that? Part of a community that puts likes and dislikes aside for a like-mindedness that breeds community like that. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, because it is a beautiful thing, isn't it? Yeah. But how important is it really, though? Like, if I'm not actively tearing someone down, can I just kind of stick to my own lane and my own friends and just kind of get through life?
Yeah. Well, short answer is no, you can't, for a whole bunch of reasons. But let me give you one of the reasons I think that might be at the front of kind of Peter's mind here when he kind of says all of you, every single one of you, in the early part of verse 8. See, in that mini-series that I talked about before, there's this defining moment where the two kind of towns come together. And I don't want to give any kind of spoilers away, but it's a key moment in the history of soccer where these working class towns put aside their rivalry and their differences and they unite together to take on the upper class football club because they know that they can't do it themselves. They can't do it as individual teams. They have to be together. It's like any good team really in sport, whether it's esports or physical kind of football-like sports, a good team has to stick together if they're going to carry on, because you need to know that when the pressure and the intensity of the game is at its maximum, that your teammates have got your back, that when you fall or when you fail, there's going to be other members of your team who will pick you up or pick up the slack to help the team move forward. And it's the same in the Christian life. When the pressure is on, when the heat comes, that's when you need others around you. When people are around you saying, hey, you're crazy for believing this Bible. You're unloving. You're old-fashioned. You're outdated. You're out of touch. You're an idiot. You're a fool for believing the Bible. When that pressure is on, you need others to come around you. When that heat is on, and man, the heat was on for Christians that Peter is writing to, you need people. You need to know you've got people that will come around you, get around you. People who will be sympathetic to you. People who know your faults and your failures, and yet they'll love you and show you compassion and humility, even if you don't deserve it. You need people who you know are on your team. And so Peter says here to those Christians, all of you, because he knows that if these Christians, they're going to get through the challenges and the pressure that they're facing, if they're going to continue to declare and display the goodness of Jesus to those around them, then they're going to need each other. They can't do it by themselves. They're going to need to be like-minded. They're going to need to show and be shown sympathy. They're going to need to show and be shown love. They're going to need to express compassion and humility and have that expressed to them, because you cannot do this Christian walk alone.
Definitely, definitely.
So no, you can't do this without actively engaging with others.
Yeah, 100%, brother, 100%. And I guess that could be a kind of challenging, a challenging word to not be alone in this COVID-19 time as well.
Yeah, I think particularly lockdown in COVID-19 and in Brisbane, it's really easy to kind of do life alone. And maybe you're really enjoying the fact that you are able to do life alone. You don't have to engage with others. And maybe you're coping really well with that. But I think the challenge here that Peter writes about is it's not just about how you're going, but it's also about how others are going. Because if you're a follower of Jesus, this command applies to you, and you to check in on how your fellow brothers and sisters are going. You have an obligation to them as your brothers and sisters in Christ because they need you. And I know there are some who are watching tonight who are feeling the pressure and the heat from others around them to give up on Jesus. They need you, and the challenge that's here is, are you going to be part of that? Are you going to reach out to them? Are you going to be there for them as they're going through the heat? Because as we've kind of highlighted a few times tonight, there's nothing more incredible about being part of a community that has each other's backs. And in fact, I've seen that. I mean, we've seen that already in our youth community recently. I know there's some of you who are jumping on Zoom chats on Friday night. I've just jumped on one already, and you don't love Zoom chats. They're not a space you enjoy, but you know that it'll be an encouragement and a blessing to others, and so you're jumping into Zoom chats. That's incredible. It's an incredible way to love others in the community. I know that there were some guys from the community that jumped on an Instagram live moment recently where someone was sharing the Christian worldview on some really controversial topics, and they jumped in. What a way to show like-mindedness to that person in that community. I've heard some of you have been going for walks and riding bikes and going skating and checking in on each other on how you're doing, getting together and reading the Bible to encourage one another. What an incredible community that is. I know some of you have been jumping in to help around church, help run tonight and produce the live stream on Sunday mornings, lockdown live. You've been there, you've been giving up your time to support and care for the community. That's incredible. And I want to say, keep that going, because that's the community that Peter is here. But I also want to say, if you're out there and you are not actively seeking to be part of the community, not pressing in to show love and sympathy and compassion, then I want to challenge you. How could you do that? Even this week, as you've heard of some of those examples, how could you take some steps this week to show love and compassion and sympathy to build up those around you? Could you even do it outside of those who are like you, even outside of perhaps youth and being a teenager? Are there people that you can care for and love? Because that's the type of community that Peter is talking about. All of you, those who follow Jesus, living in unity to declare and display the incredible news of the gospel. So that when the heat is on, when the pressure comes, Christ Central youth Christians, those who belong to Jesus, be like-minded, that you might live together to declare and display the greatness of Jesus.
Yeah, how good. There's definitely some things to think about there, Jimmy, but how about I close in prayer? Awesome. Yeah, dear Lord, I just want to thank you for what Peter wrote here, and that we have the chance to read this together. And I just want to thank you for sending your son Jesus to die on the cross for us, and that he showed us the greatest form of love. And I pray that as we go forward, that we'll be able to have a like-mindedness and be able to put aside all of our differences and likes and dislikes, and go out to declare and display your name. And I pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest video. It's been great to be with you.
It's been awesome. Please like and subscribe, and maybe check out some of our other content. That'd be awesome.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.